Coming up on this episode of the Struggling Mind podcast.
It's so painful in a way what you're saying about the challenge in opening up somehow. Like when I read stories or people tell me those things, just the loneliness and isolation, that someone could be right here, right next to you, and you do not realise how sort of lost within themselves, or how a million, even if they're right here, that they feel a million miles away from you, a million miles away from safety. And I find that so kind of emotional. I think what you're saying about it, it's a slow process, and I think built into what we're trying to do has to be a sense of patience and safety for men.
Before we go any further, can you do me a favour and just show some love for the podcast and hit the subscribe button? Doesn't matter what platform you're listening to the podcast on, because it'll just help to share these incredible stories from these amazing people. Thank you so much. Right, back to the episode. Comfortable?
Yeah.
Excellent. First, thank you so much for giving up your time, coming and having a chat. I really appreciate it. Secondly, do you just want to give yourself a little intro? I know who you are, but obviously the listeners don't. So if you could just let them know who you are, what you do, and then we can move into the questions.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm Susie, and I am a psychological researcher. So, my focus is on male suicide. So, looking at the factors that put men at risk, and then also looking at the factors that can help us build relationships, communities, societies that are more conducive to helping men deal with suicidal pain. And so I've just finished my PhD doctorate studies, which was 4 years, focused specifically on those issues, and now continuing that work.
I like you smiled when you said that. You're obviously emotionally connected to it.
Oh, Lee, I think it's so woven into me now. I don't know where I end and it begins. It's not work for me in any sense. It's just my life and my purpose, and it's changed me in profound ways. So it's such a painful and complicated topic, and also like a kind of deep honor to work on, because I meet so many exceptional, incredible people that give me energy to keep going.
Susie, I appreciate this. I really do. I think this is going to be a good conversation. I think because of being one of those men that you interviewed, and understanding what got them there, myself. I think the reason for this podcast for me is to highlight that if we don't look after ourselves, it can take us to places that some of us don't come back from. And obviously with your research and your experience, and also from the perspective of a woman as well, in that sense, like I noticed yesterday you were talking about language and having conversations, and how men may be perceived by women and how women are perceived by men, that we have this kind of nurture and protect and provide kind of attitude towards things that I think from my experience in the industry that I work in is pretty much what's killing our men, because we have this kind of internalization of I should appear and present in a certain way, and nobody should ever find out that I can be vulnerable and I have challenges and issues that sometimes I just can't cope with. And we notice that a lot with the work that we do. We really do. The men will listen, but they won't talk. So that's the funny thing, though, isn't it? Is the fact that these men, they don't realize just how exceptional, and how important and how incredible they are, because they tell themselves so long and reinforce that narrative that they're not worthy, they're not good enough, they don't match up, they don't reach those expectations. And when we start to kind of really jump onto that kind of way of thinking, it does become who we are. We start to identify with that. Excuse me. And I don't know about yourself or the other guys, but I think for me personally, once I was in that loop, I couldn't get out. I was looking for evidence to back up that negative way of thinking, and I was looking for things to go, see, I told you I wasn't good enough. See, I told you it always happens to me, because you're looking for that, because that's how you're feeling That's how you're thinking. And you start to behave in that way as well. You know, you start to present in a certain way that matches what you're thinking in your head. And, you know, and I think, you know, for the men that both you and I have spoken to that have been on the edge, contemplating having suicidal, you know, thoughts, ideations as well, is that for them it was like the shame of it.
Yeah.
You know, if now I'm here, I can't talk about it because the shame outweighs their life. You know, it's easy to pull the pin, and that's it. Then it is to face the shame, because it's kind of almost that shame and that stigma that pushes us into those places anyway. What are people going to say? What are people going to think? You know, he can't deal with this and he can't cope with that. And these things run through your mind and they get louder and louder and louder and louder. And it drowns out anything else. It drowns out any rationalization. It drowns out any kind of empathy for yourself. It drowns out everything. And all you can hear is nobody wants you. You don't need to be here. Nobody's going to miss you. You add no value. And you believe that. You buy into that because your whole being is telling you that's what you're worth. You know, and it's hard for a lot of guys to come back from that.
Yeah.
And then it's hard for a lot of guys to go, that's me. You know, this is how I feel. Because we're worried about everybody else around us. And the crazy thing is, we're basing a perception on a perception. I think he's thinking that, therefore it must be real. And that's the crazy thing. And
Yeah.
and the reality of it is that some people don't care. Not because they don't care, it's just that they don't have the capacity to care because we don't have the understanding and the awareness and the knowledge of knowing how to care. What do we say? How do we say
Yeah.
it? Where do we say it? Is there certain words that we should say? You know, is there a certain
Yeah.
place? Do we have to have a cup of tea in our hand, you know, to make it more kind of soft? And, you know, and they're the things that I'm trying to change in a way. It's all right to
Mm.
talk about suicide. You know,
Mm.
say the word and
Mm.
then tell me what that word means to you, how it makes you feel. Because I think once we understand how that word sounds to us in our head, then we can then change it to the reality. I'm asking you this question because I know that we are within that bracket of being one of those people. So if I don't talk to you about it, you're not going to talk to me about it. And therefore it just stays, you know, covered in this blanket of taboo that you can't talk about it because
Yeah.
you're going to push somebody over the edge. And you don't.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. You know, and I've learned that from myself and from working with the guys that I work with, that it's you're giving permission for somebody else to speak about their mind. And
Mm.
it's mad that it's come to that we have to give each other permission. But if that's what it takes for us to change that culture and that way of thinking, um, then I think maybe that's the way forward for us. It's difficult because we all think differently. You know, we're all brought up differently. We've all seen different backgrounds and different environments, and you know, and we absorb different information and we retain it differently. And so, you know, not one voice speaks to everybody. But I
Yeah.
think these conversations are important because you're going to teach me and help me understand a lot of things that I didn't know. And, you know, and I'm hoping that some of the things that I share with you and I share with the listeners is will help them understand that it's normal. You know, it's normal. How many times you go, fucking, I wish I was dead? You don't wish that. It's just that I don't want to face
Mm.
what's in front of me because I don't know how to deal with it. And so our first reaction is we might as well avoid it and run because
Yeah.
it's easier. But then when you take it to another level, you know, it changes things completely. Then it becomes a choice. You know, well, what would happen if? Would it be better if? You know, how
Mm.
would they feel if? How would I feel if? Then you're starting to really allowing it to ruminate in your mind, you know,
Yeah.
and then for some people, if they're not in a good space, it grows legs. And then it
Yeah.
becomes the only option because you
Yeah.
just do nothing but think about that all the time. Think
Yeah.
about it, and it's constantly on your mind. And this is just from my perspective. You're starting to think about what would be the best way. How would it work? You know, what would it do? How was it so and so? And then you're then to see how deeper you start to get into that because now you're really kind of flirting with the idea
Mm.
of it, and it's
Mm.
really starting to something you can actually really bring to fruition. And again, this is just me generalizing from my perspective, and you know, depending on the life that you've got, your lifestyle, what's going on in your life, you know, your challenges, your issues, and all that sort of stuff. If it's balanced that in a way that you are connecting and engaging and, you know, being open about stuff, you're able to kind of be aware of that and then go, look, this is how I'm feeling. I need to sort this out. I need to deal with this. But not a lot of us have that ability. Not a lot of us have that knowledge or understanding, or know that actually we're floating too far this side now. How do I get back?
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes we just focus on that one thing that totally consumes our mind, be it a negative or a positive. And that's what happened to me. You know, I got so deep into that way of thinking that I got lost. You know, I was just all about getting rid of the pain that I was feeling. And I got lost to the point that I didn't even know how I got into it or how to get back out of it. And I just knew it was just a process now that I had to continue on. And for me, I think I got to that point where I'd convinced myself it was the right thing to do because there was nothing externally telling me not to.
Mm.
I couldn't articulate how I was feeling because I'd spent so many years being told I shouldn't, you know, talk about my feelings and my emotions. I shouldn't explore those. You know, I should just keep them to myself and just wipe my mouth, build a bridge, and get over it. You know, and that's that kind of attitude that we had. And I think, you know, a lot of us, we don't know. We encourage people to talk, but how? What do we say? You know, how do I tell you about the way that I'm feeling now? I've been told for years not to. How do I articulate and put that into words?
Yeah. Lee, I know. I think, you know, it's so many things in that. I think the stigma that we have attached to thinking about suicide, talking about suicide, is amplifies the danger for people because you leave them isolated then to only have that conversation with themselves. And exactly like you've said, you can then get into this loop of you have no external voice helping you to unpack those things, helping to give you different perspective. And it so becomes so dangerous then. And I think it's a difficult balance of taking very seriously if you have thoughts of suicide, like taking that seriously, because as you've said before, it can lead you in a direction that when it has a grip of you, you wouldn't necessarily want to travel in that direction when it doesn't have a grip on you. So you have to take those thoughts seriously. But at the same time, they are very normal thoughts to think and feel. It's so normal to question whether you can keep going at moments in life. Like, life is full of pain. There are opportunities for pain, you know, everywhere. And so for me, it's completely natural that at times that pain may accumulate to the point where it feels unbearable. If you then factor in a group of people that have been socialized to deny that pain, to not articulate that pain, to not have a connection, a relationship with that pain, then of course the danger then becomes even more, in my view, like higher for that group of people. And we have to start taking some real serious cultural responsibility and accountability for that, for the danger that we're leaving a group of people, specifically men, in terms of like the relationship that they're socialized to have with their emotions. And there has to be cultural accountability around how long it takes for that relationship then to change. You know, it doesn't become, as you've just said, talk about your feelings. We're done now. We've told you can talk about your feelings. Okay, just get on with it. You know, it takes time to learn the language of what you feel, and to be, you know, especially when years and years of accumulated experiences, you know, you're now carrying that. You can't just pull one thread from it and the whole thing unravels. So that's very important. At the same time, I'm very cautious when I talk about men's emotions. It's very real in my research, the negative impact of how men are socialized to have a relationship with their emotions and the suppression of emotions that comes, first of all, primarily in their relationship with themselves, in terms of what they're feeling, to know for themselves, what am I feeling? Why? Where's this come from? You know, that suppression impacts that internal relationship, as well as impacting the external expression of it. So absolutely, that's a real risk factor that we see. But when I talk about it, I never want to perpetuate the idea that men aren't wildly emotionally intelligent and expressive and articulate, because at the same time, when given the space, I find for men to be that, you know, my life is so much richer for the emotional wisdom men have given me. So there's sort of two sort of almost contradictory ideas going on, you know, within that. But I do think that there has to be, as I was saying, you know, some cultural accountability around the ideas that men have been given, and, you know, giving them the time and space for those, for that direction of travel to be shifted.
I get that. Do you find though, I mean, I mean, for me personally, I think that to give somebody some space and to give them permission to, you know, express themselves can be difficult sometimes because we've never been given that. And a lot of it comes back to trust. Can I trust this person with this information that I'm going to share with them? Are there any possibilities they're going to use it against me as ammunition in the future? And then we kind of weigh up those options and we go, actually, do you know what? Let me just keep that to myself because I can control that. And I can then just project the, you know, the things that I want to project. And so that's always a sticking point, is encouraging people to talk, because it's always good. It's good giving them that space and letting them to talk, but it's like, what now? You know, what do you do with that information? And what do I do now I've told you that? You know, what happens? And, you know, it's that second part, as in, okay, maybe you might need to seek therapy, or you might need to seek counseling, or maybe you might need to kind of, you know, connect with something or connect with somebody or reconnect with yourself. You know, there's never that thing after. Okay, so what now? You know, now I've told you. You know, what now? What happens now? You know, does like does you know, does something start to radiate out of me? Is everything falling into? It doesn't. That's just like the first, if not the third step. Acknowledging it, being aware of it, and then talking about it. Okay, so now what do I do? How do I manage those? You know, how do I know that when I'm feeling this way, that I'm just not going to keep going in that direction? How do I learn to step back? How do I learn to become aware of how to regulate my emotions? You know, we don't, because we don't listen to that stuff, because as far as we're concerned as men, we don't need that. So we don't know how to deal with it. So we need people like myself and you that will talk about this stuff without making it sound horrible, without making it sound, I don't want to understand that, I don't want to know that. There's got to be a language. You know, there has to be a language that's familiar to them, and go, you know what, mate, I made two suicide attempts, and because I didn't want to be anymore, and this is the reason why. And you know, when you got 50 blokes standing in front of you, they've got hard hats on, high vises, beards, you know, sweaty and all that, and they're going, what did you just say? You've got their attention. You know, and I think that sometimes it isn't just about what you say, it's about how you say it. You know, it really is. You know, I wasn't going to walk into a pub and say to one of my mates, "Sorry, by the way, I'm feeling suicidal. Can you help me?" It's kind of like, I ain't feeling too good. Expecting them to help me to unpick that, to get to that point of going, actually, this is how I'm feeling, and this is what my thoughts are. We don't, you know, when you say to somebody, you know, it's all right to be vulnerable. What's their definition of vulnerable? Is it exposing themselves about everything that's going on in their life, or is it going, actually, you know, I'm struggling with this and I don't know how to deal with it? Because there's two levels there. There's the embarrassment of not knowing how to deal with it as a man, and there's also that telling somebody that you're struggling. Not to mention what's going through your body and what's going through your mind. You know, so there's always that there's that buffer straight away. Well, I can't tell him that because he's going to make me feel like this and he's going to think that. Let me just reevaluate what it is I'm going to share with him to find out if it's going to be enough for him to understand, but not too much for him that he's going to use it. So you're constantly trying to work out what you should say and what you shouldn't say, who you should say it to and who you shouldn't say it to. And then it gets to the point where you think, sod it, yeah, it's not worth telling anybody. It's just exhausting. I'd rather just sit with my suffering because I can control it and it's familiar. And so you see what I mean? So we kind of get to that point that we want to, but we just don't know how to or who with. And so it's easier for us to go, do you know what? Let me just, so I think a lot of men do think about reaching out, but they just don't know where the support is, where the guidance is, or, you know, what to say. I'm not saying everybody, I'm not saying all men, but just a lot of the men that I've come in contact with and I've worked with, it's kind of like, well, who do I tell? I can't tell my missus, I can't tell my partner, I don't want to let them know because I don't want them to feel the way that I'm feeling. So they're always thinking about somebody else's needs, rather than their own. Did you find that a lot in your research?
Yeah, I think the trust component is really critical. I think challenges some men may experience around trusting others, especially if you've always been told to be independent and self-reliant and keep your emotions to yourself. I think a big risk factor that we find as well is also challenges in childhood that men have experienced, which means that the processes of learning how to feel safe with other people, how to trust other people, can be interrupted or harmed by experiences in childhood, whether that's experiencing abuse or violence or bullying. It can interrupt the kind of development of interpersonal trust, which is foundational to feeling safe enough to expose your vulnerabilities to other people. And I think then that there's also a challenge with, when I think about the young boys who experience adversity in childhood, so the harm and pain that they may experience as young boys, and then they're socialized as men to deny that pain or suppress that pain, it's almost then like a double jeopardy of harm that boys and men who've experienced adversity in childhood are kind of being exposed to. So the trust component it's again, that's not something that that comes through exposure and experience, and that safety doesn't happen overnight for people. So again, it's about finding the people that, this is why things like these podcasts or peer support groups, environments where there is kind of that sense of safety and acceptance of these feelings, are kind of built into the environment of that gathering, I think are really really important. And of course, it's we occupy different spaces in a way, Lee, because you're a man speaking about these issues and I'm a woman speaking about these issues. And I think that there's a permission and an acceptance that other men will feel hearing you speak that I can never bring, And so the sort of value and importance of that is, for me, absolutely critical. And so we need all these different voices in these spaces that can speak to the whole spectrum of, because suicidal thoughts and feelings can happen to anybody, so yeah.
So for you, let's just go back a little bit about you. So your research, you studied for a PhD for the last 4 years. So first of all, I commend you for that. That's a commitment. It really is. That's a lifestyle commitment. What took you there? What is it that kind of, when actually I'm going to do this?
It was personal experience in a way. So I've loved ones that have struggled with mental health issues for decades, including making suicide attempts. I've struggled with my mental health at times as well. And I think at the time that I started this, so it was a very personal mission. Like, I wanted to understand what brings somebody to a point of not wanting to be in existence anymore. And I wanted to understand what I would tell the people I love to live for. I wanted to really understand that. And then I focused on men, because I remember the time I started with my sort of master's thesis was on male suicide back in 2018. And it was when the kind of Me Too movement was kind of really exploding. There was this huge conversation in like the public sphere about male privilege. And I remember also seeing the statistic of suicide being the biggest killer of men under 50. And I thought something about these two ideas there's a huge bit of the conversation for me missing, from like men being the most sort of privileged and powerful group to men killing themselves, you know, at such high rates. There's something here about the male experience that we do not understand. And so that was that. I wanted to understand why. And then Lee, once I started, I could not stop. Even now, I cannot stop. Like, it's so it's just so like moving to me and humbling to me. And I meet so many beautiful men. Like, the beauty of men that I've experienced through doing this research is, and I think I didn't see that in its fullness before I started this work. I did not see it. I wasn't given the right glasses, as it were, to see it. And once you see it and recognize it, it feels so much kind of like my life is so enriched by it. I can't tell you, every week I'm having a conversation with a man that's enriching my life, that's thickening my bonds with the men around me as well. I find it so strange, this like battle of the sexes narrative that we've developed, as if my life was not deeply entwined with men, as if my well-being isn't deeply entwined with the men in my life prospering and being mentally well and here and in existence. Like, and so for me, I just you know, I can't stop. And there's so many things that we still need to look at and think about and understand, because there's so many factors involved in what can lead to like suicidal pain. And even though I think suicide statistics started being reported in Britain in 1861, and every year since, men have been the higher rate of suicide. So from 1861, we've had this data saying men are at higher risk of suicide. So you would have think, especially with this narrative of like male privilege and male power and male dominance, you would have thought that there would be an abundance of research to understand why men are at risk. You think that men would be invested in wanting to, you know, to know that. But there's been, given the scale of the issue, there's been really, we're still kind of at a very early you know, level of trying to explore and figure this stuff out. So there's a crazy amount of work to do, but I'm really heartened by the shifts that I am seeing. And like but I think as well that it's never, there's, as I said before, there's no silver bullet. There's so many different hands that have to come to the wheel to start kind of turning the ship around. But it is heartening to see those hands. And I love seeing all the kind of male-led responses, like the ordinary people, as it were, not the clinicians or professionals, but just ordinary men who've experienced this reality and are wanting to make change for other men, for themselves and for other men. I love that. And then I also know that we have men in common, so
Yeah.
women as well,
Yeah.
that are like
Yeah.
being like, this is, I love men. I want to help men in the same way I want men to help and, you know, support me. And like, women are also taking up that space in this conversation and saying, no, I'm deeply invested in men feeling safer and weller and having more pain-free lives. Like, I find that really like, props to Mel. She's
Absolutely.
incredible.
She really is. I mean, she's opened a gateway for a lot of guys. I think it's funny,
Yeah.
just like circling back to what you were saying about, you know, like going back to like, was it 18? What did you say it was? 18 what?
1861, I think. Yeah.
So do you think then, from your own experience and talking to guys, that the reason why it's at such a low level of kind of, I don't know, education or awareness is because we are men? And it means that we've got to tell people about us first to get people engaged and invested, but we don't want to do that. Do you think maybe that's we still got that attitude, as in we know it needs to be done, but go and ask somebody else?
Yeah, I think that's there's a that's an aspect of it. I think that something that you were saying earlier as well about men not necessarily always talking because you have a sense of like, I need to protect people from my pain. Like if I'm the protector, and I think sometimes we can demonize that feeling. For me, it's a very beautiful feeling that somebody wants to protect other people. Like for me, the essence of that is so beautiful. Of course, it could manifest in very harmful ways, both for the individual that feels they need to be the protector and the person that's being protected. So I'm not saying that it doesn't need examination, but for me, it's sort of a beautiful component of masculinity in a way, of that desire to protect, and it manifests in beautiful ways throughout our kind of society. But how you, like, I often think, for me, one of the greatest acts of protection that the men in my life that I love can do is keep themselves well, because my life without them is going to be so painful. So that, it's sort of how you create, how you can start to persuade people that have that sense of needing to be the protector, that they deserve protection as well. And we don't, I think, have a society and culture that's reinforcing the idea of men needing protection in so many different ways. Even the I know that different people talk about this better than I do, but George Tinman does a lot of work looking at like male disposability, this notion of women and girls first, or men going to fight wars, and imbued in that is a sense of a lack of sometimes protection and care for male lives. So there's so many sort of shifting plates and complicated factors that come into this reality. I feel I've drifted off question. I feel.
No, don't listen. It's good. It's all. Listen. It's all knowledge. It really is. I think if you can open someone's mind to a different way of thinking about stuff, then you're educating. You've got they're kind of hooked into that. I think, and I'll always revert back to my experience and from the guys that I speak to, because it's them. And it was their level of understanding in the first place, or lack of, purely because of the fact there wasn't enough info or knowledge out there for them. In that sense, especially when it comes to things like mental health, mental well-being, suicide, those sort of things. Because so I do a lot of work with the construction industry. We go out and we promote the Lighthouse construction industry charity. We tell them about all the facilities, the services that they can access for free, 24/7. Okay, I'll put the link into this under the in the podcast bio, and we get the honor of standing in front of men and talking about an experience or experiences we've been through, and then we tell them how we got to it, what it felt like, what it did to us, the impact, and how we slowly started to overcome it. And for me personally, I have massive abandonment issues, and I have massive issues with emotionally connecting with men from growing up, from men coming into my life and leaving. And I was also battling with my sexuality as well and all that sort of stuff. So for me, it was easier just to kind of put a barrier down and stay on the periphery of my friends, because emotionally, I didn't know how to deal with it. So it was easy for me to put barriers up, because every time a man come into my life that I had any emotion to, they left. And so for me, it was kind of like, well, if I'm loving this person and they're disappearing, I'm doing something wrong. So I might also keep them emotions to myself. And that's kind of carried out throughout my adulthood, going into relationships as well. I struggled a lot because I wanted this emotional connection and this love and all this stuff that I never had, but I didn't know how to ask for it and I didn't know how to receive it. And so for me, it was easier to push it away because that's what I was used to. And it took a lot for me to break a lot of those down. And the way that I was able to do that was standing in front of guys, because like that's me. I'm right out of my comfort zone. I'm talking to people about myself, which I find hard to do in a way. And I'm telling them things about me that I didn't tell nobody. But yeah, here I am talking to strangers. And there's something powerful on that, because for me, my reason is helping me to heal from that. I'm getting to see a different perspective, but I'm doing it in front of all the people that I would normally run away and hide from. Men. because I didn't see myself as a man. I didn't see my expectations that were given to me as a child growing up of what a man should be like. I never reached those. So I was always falling short. So then that fed into the way that I was thinking about myself. It fed into my mindset.
Yeah.
You know, if I can't reach these expectations that everybody has, then,
Yeah.
you know, I've got no chance.
Yeah.
So you try to hide that and you try to project in a different way. So
Yeah.
I push myself into work or, you know, people pleasing. If I made someone smile, made someone happy, that's an acknowledgement. It makes me feel good. You know, that's my dopamine hit. But when you're on your own, there's nobody to give you a
Yeah.
dopamine hit. You know,
Yeah.
there's nobody that's going to make you feel
Yeah.
good. There's nobody that's going to help you understand or make sense of, you know, why you're feeling like this. And you can't ask anybody, especially if you're a teenager growing up. You're trying to navigate hormones. You're trying to navigate fitting in and acceptance and who you are, what you look like, how you talk, what you dress. All those simple things that we take for granted, they come at you in abundance, and it's hard. Do you know what it's like? You know, when you're growing up as a teenager. And so to talk about your mates about something was never really there. You know, we would skirt around an issue because it was easier, because nobody wanted to commit to it, because nobody wanted to go, oh, right, so that's how you're feeling. That's what you're going through. Oh, and then it turns into kind of digging that person out and taking the piss. And so it's like a snail, isn't it? When a snail pops his head out, you touch the head, it retreats back in. And that's what I find a lot of men are. If you touch on something that they're not ready to go to, they'll revert back in and they'll just push it all down and they'll just go, fuck off. I don't want to talk about it, you know? And so, I found that a lot, but I find that when you do say to somebody, look, this is what I went through. This is what I'm doing. I understand what I needed to change about me, and I understood what I needed to change about the environment around me as well, because they were all they were all playing a part. You know, they really were. And not a lot of people have the ability to get out of their situation because that's what they're in. But there are ways to deal with that situation internally. We just don't have the ability. No, let me rephrase that. It's difficult because, as I said, not one voice talks to everybody. So it doesn't work for everybody. And some people don't want to talk about it. Some people don't want to visit it. Some people don't even want to think about it. And that's okay. You know, you can't make somebody talk about it. But the more we keep having these conversations, there's going to be they can listen from a distance. You know.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that listening is potentially bringing them closer and closer to the moment when the time might be right for them to talk. And so everybody has to do that in their own pace and have their own, you know, journey to it. And
So for you, this is the thing that I'm curious about is, so obviously when you decided to do your PhD, how did you then get in contact with these guys to ask them to share?
yeah, I mean, Lee, the response to studies has been unbelievable.
Really?
It's Lee, I can't, it's still surreal to me. It still doesn't feel real. The amount of it just felt like this sort of universe kind of just rose up to meet the work. And I just think, to me, Lee, it was so symbolic of the hunger that so many men have to be heard, to have their pain heard, and often not even for themselves, because they want things to be different for other people. Like
Yeah.
that desire to help and support. When you ask men very directly, when when you clearly say that to men, I need your help, which was what I was saying, because that's what I needed, then they just, they rose up in their thousands basically. And it's so moving to me. And then you feel kind of profound connection to these people, and a responsibility around, well, how do I carry this forward now? How do we, turn turn these insights into tangible things that are going to shift things for other people. But yeah, Lee, listening to your story, it's really moving, and so much of what you're saying resonates with, as it should in a way, because I'm hoping that the research is saying the right things, but so much of what you've shared with your story is so you know, kind of moving, and the pressures on some people, you know, those pressures of meeting expectations, those pressures of feeling the pain of feeling like a failure, and like, and then the fact that some people feel then that they don't deserve to live anymore because they haven't been able to meet those expectations, like that absolutely you know, breaks my heart. And then things that you're saying about like the performance of self that then comes in, because you're not able to show, you don't feel that you have the safety or permission to share those struggles, so you're then performing to the external world of somebody coping and happy, well, whilst internally like things are, the pain is getting bigger and bigger, and so you get this growing gulf between how you're presenting to the world and the internal reality of what you're feeling. And as that gulf gets bigger, the idea of how you're ever going to build a bridge across it, you know, becomes more and more you know, terrifying. And I think that, yeah, it's really hard as well when you've had experiences in childhood, they're so ingrained, you know, those wounds are so ingrained. And what I think like talking about it and therapy helps you to do is help you to understand the patterns, help you to understand your triggers. It doesn't mean, I mean, I'm the same. There's things in situations that I will be, you know, it's activated some ancient wound in me. It doesn't stop activating, but what I'm able to do is just have a better conversation with myself about, Susie, we don't now have to do A, B, C, and D because
Yeah.
that's been activated.
Yeah.
We can make a different choice. None of that's fucking easily, like, so because when those ancient wounds are activated, like, I'm in a volatile place. Like, you know what I mean? I always think of it like a like World War II bomb that's not been detonated. You know, when you find they're found like in a village
Yeah.
somewhere,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
have to
So
get
yeah.
they have to get the bomb disposal squad in to like make sure that the bomb is, you know, very carefully deactivated. And you know,
Make
I
it so.
definitely, yeah, I think when you got like things from childhood that you know, it's those are difficult things to manage. And again, I make the point again that when you, for men and boys that have experienced those challenges in childhood and then socialized to deny your pain, it's so so dangerous. And there's still, you know, certain experiences that I think there are real taboos around men specifically. Like I've heard many stories now about like men who've experienced sexual abuse, sexual violence, domestic abuse, psychological abuse, and we still have to shift the cultural understanding that men can be victim of those experiences. There's a great theory by some psychologists called Seeger and Barry who talk about how our empathy, the gender bias in our empathy, and the fact that we are potentially socialized to more readily see men as causing harm than being harmed,
Yeah.
and more you know, sensitive to seeing men as having privilege rather than having disadvantage. And when that occurs, you're leaving the men who have been harmed, who have been disadvantaged, which are so many, because you know that is such a common experience in life. We leave them so profoundly isolated, and there's such a human need, Lee, to have your pain heard, just
Absolutely.
to have it heard and acknowledged and received and given legitimacy. And I think that there's we still have some way to go to you know, to allow that for some men. So
So for you and the research that you did, I mean, the reason I'm picking at this is because you've got access to quite an abundance of research in the sense that, you know, you reached out, they reached out to you, and you was, you know, you was in a situation where you could have this research at your hand and actually speak to these guys, tangible energy exchanging, conversation, same room with these guys. And for me, it's like, was there any kind of obvious patterns that led up to, them making their attempts? Was there any kind of behavior that was prevalent within each of these guys that you can go, actually, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that, as you said, silver bullet will change everything, but
Yeah.
if we can start to understand, the patterns, and we can start to understand the behavior that leads up to that, then we can start giving that information out to people and saying, look, not everybody's going to be the same, but you start to be withdrawn or you become more outgoing.
Yeah.
Certain patterns are giving your stuff away, telling people that you love them, kind of tying up
Yeah.
loose ends and that sort of stuff. There are those sort of things, but everybody's unique. But there must
Yes.
be, or is there something that you've noticed that kind of, no?
There was such diversity in the stories, Lee, of people who planned their suicide attempt for years, people who thought about it for minutes and then did it, people that in the lead up to the attempt felt really like full of pain, other people who felt kind of happy, almost at peace, because they'd made their decision about what they were going to do. Some people who told absolutely nobody, some people who talked about suicide quite openly. There were all these different manifestations of kind of what the accumulation of that pain looks like for people. And I understand why people, of course, we want to know the things to look out for. And in some ways, this is why I kind of stress almost the importance of taking responsibility if you are somebody that can feel that way. I'm somebody that can feel that way. And so I'm trying to share more with the people in my life that is a way that I can feel, because I need more awareness around me that things can sometimes, move in that direction. So that you can build in the tools for yourself to know, what do I need to do when I don't feel safe anymore? Because for me, when those feelings come down, it's kind of like a fog and you become kind of disorientated and you can lose sight and perspective. And so it's like I need to have a kind of like emergency pack of tools that I have to use. And so I would say the stories of men as well are so unique. Like you will have stories about people from completely different socioeconomic ends of the spectrum, or men who in relationships with families and children, but men who've been single for a long time or have never had a partner or a relationship. So all this variety of stories, but the kind of common themes that we saw around these stories was kind of harm in three sort of core psychological areas of their life. So harm in relation to their emotions, and this dysregulation of emotions that we think is partly rooted in the way that men are socialized to suppress those emotions, and also the way that societies are socialized to read distress. So we're not necessarily that good at reading signs of distress in men. So I would hear stories of men who went to the doctors, for example, and said how they were feeling, but said it in very matter-of-fact tones. So the doctor's not seeing what they think is a presentation of someone in acute crisis, because somebody's able to talk quite calmly and clearly about it. And so they've not necessarily been understood as somebody at high risk, even though in that moment they were. So harms in relation to men's emotion, harms in relation to how men feel about themselves, how they think and feel about themselves. So these ideas of male success, and if you aren't meeting those standards, then these notions of profound failure that seem to come. And again, those failures can be in relation to a variety of things. So job, unemployment, income, relationship, sexuality, having been a victim of abuse, all kinds of ways in which men may internalize a feeling of failure and not living up to what men should be. And then this third area about harms done in relation to men's meaningful connections with other people. If you're hiding feelings of failure, if you're pretending to be okay, if you're suppressing your feelings, it's very difficult at times then to build very meaningful connections with other people, because you're not being given permission to be your authentic self. And then these feelings of isolation and loneliness come, or you know, maybe you're arguing more with your partners, or you're struggling to manage the sort of intimacy demands of dynamics. Again, what we talked about earlier, challenges men have around trusting. Again, if you've been told to suppress your feelings, to be independent, to be self-reliant, how do you build meaningful trust with people? It's, you know, once you start to look at it, Lee, you're just like, you know, it's so painful. It's so painful. And you think, I never knew that so many men were carrying so many difficult things that society and cultures have put on their backs. Like, I know a lot of the difficult things that women are carrying because I got them in my backpack, but I didn't realize how full the backpack of the of men's were. And I do feel kind of a certain degree of like shame and distress around the fact that you know, I didn't see those things. And you know, I'm kind of on like a crusade now to try and help people that aren't men see that backpack, because, you know, until we do, you know, we need to understand the contents of each other's backpack, basically.
Yeah. And I think you said something quite telling there, was the fact that you said, and I didn't realize just how full a man's backpack is. And I think that kind of circles back to what you said earlier on, was the fact that there's this expectation, not just from us as men, but also from women.
For sure.
I expect
For
this because this is what
sure.
I've been led to believe. So therefore, if you don't reach this or achieve this, there's something not right with you.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be said as blunt as that, but anything that's said like that, the intention is still the same. You're useless.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
and one of the big,
absolutely.
yeah, and one of the big things for me is praise. You know, growing up, I never got a lot of praise. And my mom started telling me she was proud of me as I got like older. But then I started to notice that the people around me, we don't tell each other. You know, I didn't tell my
Yeah.
mates that I loved them. I didn't tell my mates that I was proud
Yeah.
of them, because that wasn't the language that we used. You know, it was kind of like, oh, look, he's got a new car, or he's got a new house, or he's had another kid. You know, those sort of things that it's expected of us to get married, have children, have a good job, go on a couple of holidays a year. That's life.
Mm.
And I was always like, there's got to be more to it than that. So when you're with the expectation thing, you know, it's given to us at such a young age. When daddy goes to work, you're the man of the house.
Mm.
Okay, so I just copy what daddy does.
Yeah.
You know, you see it a lot, don't you? You know, you've got to look after your siblings because you're the man of the house now, so I'll come back. Or if you don't have a dad and you're the eldest boy, you've got
Yeah.
the responsibility of kind of
Yeah.
and it's hard because
Yeah.
you don't know what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
But all you do know is you just shut up and you get on with it, because that's
Yeah.
what's expected. And that
Yeah.
expectation, I think that expectation is so ground into the stigma around men, that that expectation is the catalyst for that stigma, I think. Because if there wasn't that expectation to be something that you're not, then it wouldn't cover us in shame that we can't achieve that, and that we can't cope, and we don't know how to manage that, and we don't know what's beyond that. So therefore, I'll just make out that I know what I'm doing. And really, you're just
Mm.
clinging on for dear life, hoping somebody says, mate, do you want me to help you with that?
Mm.
You know, and that's what I'm starting to see more now. You know, I tell all of my mates that I'm proud of them, whatever they do, because
Yeah.
I want them to know that I'm proud of them. I want them to know that, because when you say that to them, they go, oh, thanks, mate. It's like, seriously, look, you know,
Yeah.
I'm so proud of you. And it just makes you feel better. And it makes you feel as if somebody's seeing what you're doing, appreciates what you're doing, and appreciates you. And that goes such a long way
Mm.
to connecting with another man on a level that is not intimate, but it can become intimate, that it can be trustworthy.
Mm.
And I think that's what we want as man. We just want a geezer that we can talk to and go, I've got to tell you something, and I know that you ain't gonna judge me, you're not gonna like tell anybody else, and it stays here, and you can be open with that person. And I think that's what I'm in search of, you know, is to be with people that I haven't got to pretend that I'm not Lee anymore. You know, like I think growing
Yeah.
up for me personally, I was a lot of things for a lot of people, and I got lost. I got lost. My identity got lost. I got lost who I was, what I was about, and it got very vacuous and it got very lonely. And now, you know, it's important that I give myself what I need first. It's important that I understand what I need and how I'm feeling from the minute that I get up to the minute that I go to bed, because then I'm able to know what I can give to another person. You know, if I'm at
Right.
40%, you know, I can run at 100%
Yeah.
at 40%, but I've not got a lot to give away.
Yeah.
You know, I need to kind of work out what I need first. If I'm dipping beneath 50, I don't have the capacity to take on a lot of stuff. But
Yeah.
I was never aware of that.
Yeah.
You know, I was never
So,
aware of that.
yeah. Lee, what were some of the things that have shifted that for you?
I think for me, it was starting to see me. Starting to see. Now, don't get me wrong. You know, I'm like 8 years into doing some proper deep work on myself.
Yeah.
Like proper deep work, and I still suffer with imposter syndrome, and I still dig myself out, and I still think I'm not good enough. But I'm able to be aware of that, and I'm able to go, hang on, Lee, come on. Like, why are you saying those things? Why are you thinking those things? And I can track it back. It could have been something that happened that day, happened a week ago, but I give myself that space to go, right, let's just have a little look and see what it is that's making you feel like this. And I never did that before, because my narrative was just get on with it. Don't ask no questions.
Right.
Don't look into
Yeah.
it. Don't figure it out. Just get on
Yeah.
with it, because there's other people that are struggling worse than you, and you need to get to where you're going to. And that becomes the focus.
And what's the transition then from shifting from don't look at that to starting to look at that?
I made 2 suicide attempts.
Right.
So that's what it
Yeah.
took me to. And so
Yeah.
because of the fact that after the second one, I'm like, well, there must be a
Yeah.
reason why. And then it
Yeah.
allowed me to counseling changed my life.
Right.
I went to counseling and it changed my life because I had to adjust to be sitting in a space where somebody was going to listen to me. I had to adapt to the fact that I had a choice to get up and walk out, but it was never a choice. You know, I had to sit there. I had to do something. I had to change something within me. And changing that one thing that changed was talking.
Yeah.
It was just words that came out of my mouth. That's what changed for me. Um, and as I said, every time I stand in front of a group of guys and I talk, I'm owning, I'm owning that. It's mine. I can control that now. And for me, it's not about what people think, because I can't control that. It's
Yeah.
about their actions with that information that I give. And I had to really change the way that I saw things and really spin it into a different perspective. You know, every time I walked onto a site and it was men standing in front of me, I had to talk to this man, all my fears come out. This is my issue. That's my issue. This is that. And I wasn't really thinking about them. You know, I was thinking about me. And I think that was part of the healing process. You have to acknowledge the stuff that's making you stuck, is just gripping you. And
Mm.
so by being able to kind of really stand there and say, I'm Lee. I have a history of drug abuse. I have a history of alcohol abuse. You know, I have issues with my sexuality. I have issues with this. I'm actually holding that mirror up and going, these are my issues. And I am facing them. And I am doing what I can about them with the information and the tools that I've got. I just didn't realize it, because it had to be a certain way, because it comes back to that expectation, you know. And I didn't expect anything from these guys because they were giving me their time anyway. So I'd always thank them. Like, I appreciate your time. I know that you'd want to be doing something else. I know you'd rather be somewhere else, but I appreciate you giving me this time because you're helping me. And then what you're doing is you're telling them guys what they're doing rather than what they're not doing. You know, you did this and it's making me feel like this. And that's because of you. And I want to thank you for that. I want to
Right.
acknowledge that. And when you do that, you know, it's amazing what the guys' responses are. You know, they'll come up and say to you, mate, you're so brave, you know, and I admire you and I do so and so and I think so and so. And I go to mate, and I admire you as well. You know what I mean? Like, you could have just turned on your heels and you could have walked away. And I think when you meet that, it completely changes the way that people think about certain things, because you're
Yeah.
meeting it with, I see you, mate. You know, you didn't say
Yeah.
anything, but you were just there. And I needed that from you. But you didn't know that. So I'm just acknowledging that back to you now. And I think that's really important, because sometimes it isn't about finding an answer or finding a solution. It's just about knowing that somebody else connected with you
Yeah.
and they kind of get it. And that's what we want. We just want someone to see us and go, I get it. I get it. I can't sort it, but I get it. So let me sit with you for a little while. And that's what we want. We want that nurturing that we've been told that we shouldn't have. I want to be able to feel. I know it's not going to feel nice, but I want to be able to feel, and I want to be able to be confident in myself enough to know that I can deal with this, whether it means reaching out, or if it means sitting with it, or it means working through it, or it means just allowing it to pass. I don't want to be consumed by this, I don't know, run and hide, or fuck it. I don't. For me personally, I'm tired, and I'm thinking if I got to that point, then I need to now share it with these other guys. And you have to be honest. You have to be honest with it. And when you say the word suicide, people go, "Don't want to go there with you, mate." It's like, fine. You don't have to, but don't let that word spook you. Don't let that word take you somewhere that you can't come back from, purely because of the fact that you've got your own stigma around that word, not to mention the stigma that you're already facing as a man, not to mention what you're trying to navigate already being in this society.
Yeah.
And I think we don't see that. I done a thing last year, an Instagram live called "What's It Like to Be a Man in Today's World?" And the different things that different men said was just incredible to understand that. And it is about how they're perceived and how they're seen and acceptance. If I'm not accepting parts of myself, then other people are going to highlight that and use that against me. Well, then just to look at that differently. I'm all about reframing stuff. I've had to learn that
Yeah.
because I get up every single morning and all my negative soldiers just want to attack me and tell me today's going to be shit.
Yeah.
You get that, don't you? And so I have to
100%.
I
Yeah.
have to get up and I've got to sit there and I've got to wake up these positive soldiers for them to go to war and combat and silence them. Sometimes they win, sometimes they don't, but I have become aware of what I need from me. And I think that's really important. And that's the message that I'm trying to give out to men, is that you have to give yourself what you need first. There's nothing selfish in that. And I always use this analogy. Think of a triangle, right? We sit at the bottom, we're holding everything up because we're led to believe that we need to be holding this up. But if you turn it around the other way, and then you sit at the top and you're looking after yourself and you're nourishing yourself and you're making yourself feel good, that resonates and trickles down, and it makes these people feel the same way. But what it's doing is it's encouraging them and empowering them to do the same thing, because you're all taking responsibility and you're all taking a little bit and you're all listening and you're all talking and you're all moving in the same direction. And that's my mission, is to get it from that to that to that. That's the only way I can explain that,
Beautiful.
is that way. And
Yeah.
and so yeah, it's not going to happen overnight.
No, and I think it's really important that you acknowledge as well that it's still it's an ongoing thing that you manage. It's not that there's this resolution of to things. It's something that you then kind of like the food that we eat every day. We always have to eat food every day, and so again, kind of with your mental health, it's a part of living, a part of life, and it's developing those tools. And you can only develop those tools from really from starting to understand who you are and what's happened to you and how that shaped you. I found it so moving when you say about don't let that word suicide take you where you don't want to go. I find that so moving, and so much of my time, Lee, I'm having these extraordinary, beautiful conversations with men like we're having right now. And sometimes I think this, were it not for certain circumstances, this conversation would not be happening. This man would not be here right now. And it is kind of like, it's so emotional thinking about all this sort of beauty and wisdom and love that comes from men like yourself that have been to those the darkest of dark places that your brain can take you, and all of this magical medicine that you're now able to feed out into the world. And I think, thank God, that life, that you're still here to do that. And then your heart kind of breaks for all those men that weren't able to.
Yeah.
That story ended differently for them. And and then you think about the men that might be listening to that are in that moment or leading up to that moment, and you think, what is it that can be said to help those men hold on and help those men, you know, find the tools that they need to, you know, I think pain is, I'm run on pain, Lou. And my life has found relatively positive outlets for that pain now, instead of potentially destructive outlets before. But I'm
That
still
makes sense.
fueled by pain, if that makes
That
sense
makes
at all.
absolute
Not to
sense.
say there isn't joy and pleasure in my life as well, but absolutely that kind of what is channeling me. So it's not that the pain, you know, just evaporates. You just learn to direct it in certain ways, and it has less of a hold then on your life. I think the thing about, you know, what we were talking about earlier about, like, what does that point of suicidal crisis look like for people? And I'm saying the behaviors, external behaviors, manifest differently, but what you almost always hear is that internally it is the crescendo of pain, like the pain has flooded everywhere, and you cannot see straight because you're just swimming in pain. And so building a relationship with that pain, building a dialogue with that pain, learning to understand what are the contents of that pain, where has that pain come from in my life, how can I learn to live with that pain, because it's not going to suddenly kind of disappear. And again, just coming back to the idea of societies and cultures making visible the ways in which men can be harmed by life, so that we start to give that pain, you know, like visibility, in the same way that we need to give everybody's pain visibility, so that we can start to kind of understand it. And whilst everybody's pain is individual, I do think that we can start looking at certain social and cultural ideas and say, there's a way in which you can be leading men to more pain and harm than they need to be put in, because life is going to bring us enough, you know, anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that, I don't know about you, I think I've got to a certain stage in my life now. And again, this comes back to kind of investing in myself, you know, understanding what it is that I need, understanding who Lee is, and understand who Lee's becoming. You know, I never used to do that. I was just literally just living from day to day. Never thought I'd get to 30, never thought I'd get to 40, you know, and then everything kind of fucking imploded sort of like 6 months after turning 40. But there was lots of drugs and alcohol involved in that, and lots of that was about escaping. And there was also a part of that about accepting, you know, being accepted for being gay, being accepted because you look a certain way, you know, all those sort of things, being accepted being a man, being accepted being 6'4" and having a slight tan, all these things that are so obvious to everybody else, but they're not to you. And all of a sudden they're highlighted and like, oh shit, I have this problem. Because it's always, we always look, you know, our reaction is always a negative. Oh, but really? Oh, really? You think? Or, oh, you know, and all this, yeah, but there's never like, okay, I can see that. And I know that there's something I need to address. It's a lifestyle. It's an ongoing job. You know, it's something that you have to commit to. There's days that you don't feel like it. Don't get me wrong. There's days that I don't even want to get out of bed. But that's when I know my body's saying to me, I need you to do nothing. Whereas before, I'd battle against that. What's wrong with me? Why am I not doing this? It's all right. Whereas now I'm going, okay, my body's saying, we just need to rest. Don't do anything. But my body's getting that, but my brain's still going over a time. My brain's still giving me a hard time. You should be doing this and you should be doing that. And why do you think that? And then before I would hook into that and it would carry me and take me away. Whereas now I'm like, no, I'm tired and I just need to sit and do nothing, you know, and then let me naturally get up and go and do something rather than force myself to do it. Because there are things that I've learned is that if I'm forcing myself to do something, I don't want to be there. I don't want to do it. Therefore, I'm pretending and I'm just showing up to be something for someone. If I don't want to go or do something, I know why. Why don't I want to go? I don't want to be in that environment. I don't want to be around those people. I don't have the mental capacity to deal with these people at the moment. You know, I'm figuring out me because I'm allowing myself that time to think about it. You know, our cognitive dissidence and our automatic responses are all based on previous.
Yeah.
It's all past. You know, it's stuff that's happened in the past. And we all try to kind of translate that and create it into our future. And, you know, I mean, I've been around some good men to learn that I can't predict, but I can create. But it starts where I'm standing, you know, and not where I want to be. Because for me to create that, I have to really connect with the process. And I have a very, very active mind, very active mind. And I talk bad to myself a lot. But I can deflect a lot of that as well. And sometimes for me, it's all about movement. If I'm moving, my mind is starting to remember other things, and then my brain's starting to connect with that, and then my brain's starting to create these new refreshing habits. But I have to keep moving. If I sit still and I'm stagnant, then I'm in that space. That's it. My brain doesn't
Yeah.
go any further. But when I get up and I
It's,
move,
yeah.
all of a sudden I've got all this space to move into. And it's so, and these are things that I've learned. You know, I've learned this because I've started to understand how important I am. And it's a priority to think about me. And that's not saying that fuck anybody else, but it's just, as I
No.
said, it's that pyramid thing. You know, I can't pour from an empty cup. If I've got nothing to
Yeah.
give, I'm not going to lie and say I've got it, because I've done that in the past,
Yeah.
and it burns you out.
Yeah.
You know, and it.
And it's a big journey sometimes, Lee, just to get to that point. Because
Mm,
I think sometimes your self-esteem can be so obliterated and you can feel like such a piece of shit. Like learning to take care of yourself can be so hard for people.
because we're
And
not taught
it's,
to, are we?
yeah, and painful to kind of even imagine that you're worth caring for by yourself, let alone
Yeah.
anybody else. Um, as yeah, even just getting to that point can be such a kind of agonizing, um, journey. And I think, I mean, I related to so much of what you were saying just then. Like, I, my brain as well is like all the time chat, 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 a lot of shit talk back to my about myself, and like,
Yeah.
if I don't keep moving and doing, my brain just eats itself, and
Oh,
then I'm in danger.
mm,
And that's what I mean about what the things that we've talked about, both of us, about like developing tools, understanding your patterns, taking responsibility for, like, I got to take responsibility for keeping myself well because I want to stay well. I want to stay living, and it's it's figuring that stuff out. It doesn't stop mean that the brain stop. I can't stop my brain being chatty, but I can start implementing tools to, like, well, okay, how do we shift this slightly?
yeah.
Um, yeah, very much.
So moving it on, so these
Yeah,
guys that you were speaking about, did so for them once they kind of acknowledged there was something within themselves that they would need to address, for them kind of support and their change of life, what steps did they make?
yeah.
Did it take the attempt for them to go, actually, I need to reach out for help, or I want to make a change? Or was this something more, you know, internal that shifted for them?
I definitely notice that an attempt can be a significant transition point, and it's a challenge for me understanding or figuring out how you reach men before
Mm,
you get to that point, because I think once you've made an attempt, it's very difficult to ignore that your previous coping strategies are not necessarily serving you, and so there's more. um I think, as well as, for a lot of men, after they've made an attempt, suddenly their pain is visible. Often men, they they've kept it so within themselves, and then post attempt, suddenly it can't be kept within yourself anymore. Like, you have to, it almost forces you in a way to start having to acknowledge and talk about it and share about it with, um with other people. But again, I think that there were those three areas that I talked about earlier as the things that often seem to be the common pattern in people's stories about those three areas of harm, in terms of learning to manage and live with thoughts of suicide. Some men they don't make an attempt again, and maybe they don't even think about suicide again. But for a lot of people, it's still an ongoing, aspect of where their mind can go to. It's just getting better tools to manage it. And so I always struggle with what word to put on what we're describing now, because for me, like, people sometimes talk about recovery, but for me, it's not that you don't have you've recovered from something. It's more about learning to manage it more effectively. And so those three areas where change sort of seems to come through is about learning to connect with your emotions, learning to understand what your emotional experience has been, learning to have a better conversation with yourself about the things that you're feeling, and then making your own decisions about who you then want to share that with, if you want to share it with. But for me, primarily just being able to have that better conversation with yourself gives you more possibilities about what you could do with what you're you know, feeling and experiencing. The second area is around, you know, connecting with yourself, building that relationship, and learning to regulate your thoughts and feelings about yourself. And for a lot of men, that's about normalizing these feelings of failure, instead of seeing like this idea of not meeting expectations as being uniquely condemning of you as a man, starting to often through like peer support groups. I think things like what you're doing with in the construction world, like hearing other men share their stories, like starts to give you permission to expand your idea of what a man can look like and who a man can be and what kind of men are worth admiring and celebrating. And then the third area is around starting to build those meaningful connections with other people. And again, that can come for people in really you know, different ways. But those sort of three big, I think of them as like our psychological tectonic plates. These are the things shifting around my brain and emotions, that we have to learn how to regulate these three tectonic plates: my relationship with my emotions, my relationship with myself, and my relationships with other people, like my meaningful connections with other people. You know, what tools have I got to keep those things as regulated as I can be? And again, Lee, it's not like I shit talk myself every day. So it's not that like it instantly, it's not like I'm saying that there's, but I know that I'm doing it and I can trace it back and be like, Susie, I understand where that behavior's come from. I know in a way I'm trying to protect myself, because if I shit talk myself first, it doesn't matter then what any other person sort of shit talks about me, because I've already kicked myself in the so I can start to be more compassionate with that voice and be like, okay, I understand you and you don't have to, you've had your piece, and now we can let someone else sort of talk for a bit. And all those three areas as well, Lee, interact with one another. If I'm feeling like a failure and I'm suppressing my emotions, so I'm not sharing those feelings of failure with other people, I'm getting I become isolated then from my relationships with other people. So all those three tectonic plates are also, they shift, they make each other shift. And it can, again, there's so much diversity in the stories that we see. Some men, therapy and counseling was really critical. For some people, it's about peer support, community interventions. Some people, it's like a buffet of interventions. You might try this, you might try that. I've also got to flag that there is a lot of evidence about negative help seeking experiences, and we have to acknowledge the reality of certainly like clinical services, the waiting list, and then if you wanted to go privately, like the costs around that. I'm not saying that any of this stuff is easy to do, and I hopefully we've emphasized the point sufficiently. Like, it's a lifelong engagement. And so I don't want to make any of this sound like it's easy, because it's some of the hardest work that you can do. But also, I mean, you must have felt that for yourself, Lee, like looking back to where you were to where you are now, and
I see. There's still a percentage of me, I'd say about 20-25% of me, that still doesn't believe that I deserve to be what I am. Okay. Now that's a very, very, very small part from what it used to be. You
Right.
know, I'm talking like 60, 70%, you know, very, very vocal, very, very light. But now it's about 20, 25%. You know, I'll look out and I think, God, you know, I have this life. I don't deserve this. What have I done to deserve it? Because that's my automatic response. Now I'm like, well, you do, you know, because you're here. This is your life, you know, so absorb it, you know, and fucking just, you know, you deserve to have that. So I have to talk to myself, but I'd never done that before. So that's progress in my eyes because I'm aware of it. I'm saying it to myself, as in I'm shit talking myself, and I'm going, but hang on a second, let's just reflect here for a second. Let's just remind yourself of how you got here, the work that you did, the progress that you've made, you know, the sacrifices that you've had to do. And then it kind of does. And I think, but I'd never done that before. So that's one of my coping strategies is let's just I've done the automatic response. I've told myself I'm a dickhead. Now let me just stand back and let me just see it for what it really is. And
Mm,
so sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes it's really hard. You know, this
mm,
I'm 49 in a couple of weeks, you know, and for the last 8 years I've been unpicking a lot of stuff. 40 years worth of crap. And it's not going to happen overnight. You know, there were
yeah,
days where I just think to myself, what is the point?
yeah,
Because that part that I'm trying to unravel is still quite prominent and it's still strong. But this is growing stronger. You know, me, Lee, now that you're seeing in front of you, is growing stronger. I'm
mm,
starting to have my own mind about knowing what I want to do. And, you know, my brain opens so much now that things that I said, oh, I can't do that. I'm like, okay, let me think about how I can do this. How's it going to, you know, how's it going to, what do I need to do? You know, how do I need to change the way that I learn stuff or understand stuff? So I'm open to be open. Whereas before, I'm like, no, don't do that shit. Not interested. If it doesn't work the way that I know, I don't care. I would never bend or flex. You know, I had such a fixed
right,
mindset.
yeah, yeah,
And so I've had to learn that I've had to be more open. You know, the only way that I'm going to learn is to be open to learning, which means taking information from other people and other sources and then trying to understand that and digest it in a way that it makes sense to me. So I've also learned, you know, the way that I learn things, the language that I use about myself, to myself, and about myself to other people. You know, I've had to learn that slightly, to understand that life isn't the picture that people show you. There's what comes before and what comes after. They're the things that I'm interested in. We can all see this. We've all got access to that, but I want to know before and after. You know, where was you? How was that picture taken? How much filtering did you do? And then this part of it was who was it for? What was the reason behind it? That's the curiosity that I have for people. He's like, I know that you feel shit, but why? You
mm,
know, why do you feel shit?
mm,
Well, because we just have a load of answers ready to go. How you feeling? Yeah, I'm good. I'm fine. I'm okay. How you really feeling? You know
mm,
what? This morning I feel like shit. Why are you
yeah,
feeling like shit, man? You know, I had a really bad night's kip last night. So, but that conversation started. You know, it started without realizing it.
yeah,
It doesn't have to be about the problem. It can just be something that you don't realize is related back to the problem. And these are the things that I've learned about myself was that I was getting in bed with the problem, you know what I mean? Rather than understanding how that problem came up and how I can sort that out. I'm like a 5 year old, you know, I'm kind of like, I want to know. I'm
yeah,
curious. You know, as a
yeah,
kid, we're told to be curious, but as we're an adult, we're told to be quiet,
yeah,
you know, don't probe, don't poke,
yes,
don't
yeah,
ask. You know, it got to the point as a kid that you're kind of like, you know, go out and explore. Go and, and then it was like, you don't ask, you don't get. Or people that ask don't get.
mm,
That's information that was been given to us is that you do not ask for help because, you know, it should be something that somebody wants to do for you for nothing. So you think of that narrative and that conditioning, especially into a young boy where you kind of think, well, I'm not going to say nothing to anybody. You know, if I want a cuddle, then I go to my nan because I know she'll give me a cuddle because I haven't got to ask for it. But I daren't ask my mum because she never did that. It wasn't in her vocabulary. It wasn't in her thingy. And those things impact you as well. You know, intimacy. you know, asking for something. Can you give me a cuddle? Can you give me a kiss? Can you stroke my hair? Can you rub my feet? You know, that's not necessarily getting someone to do something to you because your feet are sore. It's connecting. That's another way of emotionally connecting with somebody. You know, you're physically touching me and doing something for me. And when you don't have that or you've never had that, it's alien. But you crave it,
Mm,
but you don't know how to ask it
mm,
because you don't know what it feels like. You've got nothing to compare it to. So the first thing you do is reject it because it's kind of like, oh, can't deal with that.
mm,
But every fiber of your being is saying, that's what I want. But I don't know how to say that to you without me saying that I need something.
yeah.
Do you see, but do you see that how it's kind of wired into the brain in that sense?
Yeah, and I just think it's so, I've spoken about this before, but like sometimes people will say something, like there's certain words for me to say out loud that I have to climb Mount Everest in my mind to get to the point where I can say those words. It's so terrifying for me to say them out loud to somebody. And other people can just open the front door and say those words. And you never know when you're in dialogue with somebody who's just climbed Mount Everest to say that thing that they've just said. Um, but you know, I think we've spoken quite a lot about it's, you know, it takes time and it's a lifelong thing, but also things can change. Like Lee, you must, like if we went back, Lee, age 39 or just turned 40, and would say and said to that Lee, like, you're going to be on a podcast talking about these things, you're going to be going into rooms full of men that work in construction and sharing those things. Like, I imagine that Lee would have found that pretty hard to
No way.
imagine. Yeah.
No way. Because everything that you've just said is everything that I feared. Everything that I feared. I could put on my mask, right, and I could be a certain person. You know what I mean? Because I know that I've got to be that person for a certain amount of hours, and I can go and take it off, and then
Yeah.
pretty much
Yeah.
fucking annihilate. But now, you
Yeah.
know, it's not like that. You know, I give myself permission to move myself from situations I don't feel comfortable in, and it's not about that person. It's about me. I don't want to be sitting here because I don't feel the same way that you feel. So therefore, I'm going to give myself permission to leave. Not your problem. Don't take it personal. This is a decision I'm making for me. It then starts becoming messy when people are like, oh, but what did I do? And why do you kind of like, this is not about you. Don't make this about you.
Mm.
You know, don't make this about you. And so there's always, when there's a transition going on, it impacts people around you as well. And, you know, you're mindful to a degree, but you're also mindful to a degree that they have to give you that room to grow and they have to give you that room to transition into as well. And some people don't know how to deal with that. You know, some people don't know how to deal with change because it makes them feel then that, oh, if they're doing it, I need to do it. But they're not there.
Mm.
You are, and that kind of thing. So you know, it's going back to that. It's not easy. It's not because there's so many things going on, and there's so many things that you have to be aware of. And for some people, that can be overwhelming.
Mm.
It's just too much.
Mm.
It's just easy to stay where you are, you
Mm.
know. And I think for me personally, it's just encouraging that person to go, just try it from this perspective. Or what do you think will happen if you tried it like that?
Mm.
Or better still, what do you want to happen? Because we're so used to doing something without knowing what the outcome is,
Yeah.
that if we go into something going, I want to
Yeah.
achieve this, then we're going to hit the mark more closer than we are if we don't. You know, it's I still get embarrassed talking about suicide. Um, because you know, it's still new. It's still a new topic. You know, it really is. And you know, I don't want to be going in and throwing things and going, but at the same time, I have to understand where other people are coming from and their feelings towards it. So you have to be sensitive in a way. You know, I run a peer support group on a Tuesday night, and we were talking about suicide, and the guys were really uncomfortable about it. And then we came back the following week, and like each of the guys went, like, this is how it made me feel. This is
Oh,
what
wow.
I felt like. But it was good
Yeah.
because they're acknowledging their feelings.
Yeah.
They didn't realize that. They was just kind of like, I don't want to talk about this because, and then that was it. The conversation finished there. But then they went away, they reflected and come back and went, this was the
Amazing.
reason why, is because it's something we don't talk about, because it's taboo, because I don't have any information, because I'm not aware, you know, because I've been impacted by it, you know, it goes
Yeah.
back to that snail thing again. You press the head and you're
Yeah.
going to go in. And so for them, they took the time to go away and reflect
That's
and then come
amazing.
back and share. their findings with each other. But what they didn't realize was that they're all educating each other because they're all passing on knowledge. And we don't realize that. And that's why I said to the guys, listen, look, you guys need to be really proud of yourself because you've just elevated your knowledge on something that you guys would have run away from. And I explained to them what they did, but they didn't see that. And then after they saw that, they was kind of like, oh, yeah, shit. So sometimes you do have to be a little bit subtle in showing people what they found. And, suicide is just really important to me, Susie, because every time I lose a friend, I feel like I've not done my job, and it makes me feel bad. And that's just the human part of me. And then I start to think about their families, and I start to think about, all that sort of stuff. And then I go back to them and think, why didn't I see that? Why wasn't I aware of that? What was my relationship like? And so I can't disentangle myself from that because I was that person.
Yeah.
But I also have to be careful to protect myself because that wasn't my battle.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It wasn't my battle.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I think that for me going forward, it's important to get as much information, as much knowledge as possible, but just to try and change the connotations that are attached to that word, because it's such a negative, horrible, derogatory word that we need to change those connotations. We need to change the way that it impacts us, because potentially it can save somebody's life. Do you know what I mean? Like, it really can. The amount of guys that I speak to on site where they won't talk about their problems, but you ask them to raise their hands that they've been impacted by suicide, and I guarantee you over half the people in that audience will raise their hands. And it isn't just for one person. Sometimes it's two or three.
Yeah.
And then you ask them, what do you do? And they say, we just get on with it. I met one guy that had 6 people in 12 months that he'd lost to suicide. And one of those was his dad.
Oh God. Yeah.
And he was back at work, and he didn't want to come and listen to the talk because he said, it doesn't bother me. I'm not impacted by it. And then we stood there and we had a little conversation, a little chat. And I was like, look, why don't you get the support for your mum? Because he won't have none of it. Get the support for your mum. See how she gets on with it. See if it changes anything about her. And then maybe you consider it after. And it was like, yeah, I'll think about that. Because again, offering support to him, I don't need it. Okay, so how do I get you support without actually getting you support? Okay, so why don't we look at your mum, get her support for losing your dad? Let's see how she benefits from that. And then maybe she might say to you, actually, boy, do you know what? You could benefit from having a couple of sessions. Then he was like, fine, because it was for somebody else.
Mm.
That indirect care and that indirect acknowledgement that you need support is 19, all right, let me 60% of the time it's reached with go and speak to her or go and speak to them. I don't need it, because we don't know how to accept it without being judged.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that so moving. And I think sometimes as well, like, it's almost like the pain is like this tidal wave suspended over your head. And there's that fear, if I actually sit down and let it crash, I'm going to be overwhelmed as well. Like that feeling of like, I mean, that poor man to I think that, yeah, we did a paper looking at kind of barriers to seeking help, and there were so many moving ideas in that around like feeling like you're the protector, men that was self-esteem was so low they didn't think that they were deserving of help, that they deserve to die, or if I take a place in the system, that means somebody else that might need it more isn't going to get there. Spot, all these different kind of like complicated moving things, and you've got to find a way to speak to all these different different dimensions that are going on, but just it hurts, doesn't it, to imagine I hate the feeling of people being so alone with their pain. Like, I just, ever since I was a kid, I just hated that. This, how you reach people before they're, sometimes you see, you'll meet people and you can see the pain. It's so visible. I can see how much pain you're in, but there's will be very complicated reasons around why you will not accept the support, but it is kind, you know, I'm fascinated and about how we can start to reach those people in particular, because in a way it's until you're ready. I mean, I was told in the past by certain people that love me that I should go for therapy, and it just was like water off a duck's back. I just thought that they were like, I didn't know what they were talking about basically. And until I was ready, which was basically until I was on my fucking knees, it wasn't that I was ready, but like I ran out of options. Like I was just like, you know, and I don't, until I'd got to that point, I don't know that I would have yeah, I don't know how else I could have been reached, because I did need it of it, you know, but
I never thought about that, you know. I've never thought about that. I've never ever thought about if I didn't do that, what would have happened? Because I suppose in a way you just kind of accept that this is as good as it gets, and you just gotta get on with it, you know, until something pops or something flicks or something happens. Because we are very reactive, you know, we react to something that's happened. We don't initiate stuff because we venture out, you know, venturing out into the unknown. But we deal with what's going on in front of us, or we run from it. So I never really thought about it until you just said, what would have happened if I didn't make those attempts? You know, would I still be feeling and thinking the same way to what, you know, differently to what I am now? But I'm a strong believer in things happen for a reason. You know, that first attempt, I could have been dead. That's it, game over, finished. But it wasn't. And this is the strange thing, though, and this is one of the things that I think really hits a lot of the guys when I tell them was when I came to, I didn't. My first thought wasn't, I'm lucky that didn't work. My first thought was, I'm a failure.
yeah,
Because I was already fit, I was already in that space. So therefore, there's me doing something that was for me that I was doing initially. I was in control of and knew exactly what was going to happen, you know, but it didn't work. So that just compounded how I felt. You know, I'm a failure. This proves it. You know, you can't do anything else to disprove other than the fact that you tried to kill yourself and it didn't work. Do you know what I mean? So that just goes. So that just pushed me further into that. Then, you know, I was kind of like, right, this is something that I have to achieve. You know, just to prove myself wrong. And then that it doesn't become about. You don't think about killing yourself. You just think about proving yourself wrong. Oh, I know I can do this. You know, and then the second time when it failed, I was just kind of like, okay, maybe this is a message. Maybe this is me needing to deal with something. And I left it again. You know, I ignored the red flags, just climbed even further into drugs. And then one day, I remember I just phoned an ambulance and just said, look, I need you to come and get me. You know, he'd been on a bingy weekend. Drugs didn't affect my heart rate, they affected me. So that's why I know that there was a lot of internal stuff going on with me that the drugs were hooking onto and just bringing out even more. And I suppose in a way I was kind of blasé about it. You know, it was kind of like I could blame it on the drugs. You know, getting drunk. You know, like they say, the truth. That you know, there's nothing better than somebody who's having a drink because they tell you the truth. It's almost like it was kind of giving me the confidence to talk about how I was feeling. And if no one listened to it, I could just go, oh, I was drunk. I don't notice I was talking shit. So there was always a way, you know, in your head, you're always thinking if I did, this is how I could justify it and take it back. And so, you know, the day that I found the ambulance and they come and pick me up, even then, I didn't trust them. Even then, you know, I got into the ambulance and I felt they were judging me. And I was already conceiving an idea of how I was going to escape before I got to the hospital. Because in my head, then I'd gone through, they're going to take me into triage. They're going to, I actually convinced myself that they were going to turn me into a woman. You know, this is how bad my psychosis was. They were going to get me on there. They were going to cut my dick off. They were going to like do all this sort of stuff. So in my head, on the way to the hospital, all I kept thinking about was how am I going to escape like these people, because these tangible physical people are going to do things to me. And I run. You know, I got to the hospital and I run. Like I run through the hospital. I threw away my phone. I threw away my watch. Threw away my credit card. Everything that I felt had a chip in it that would track me, because I didn't want to be found. But I don't know where I was running to. And I don't know what I was running away from, but I just knew that I had to keep moving, keep moving and keep moving and keep moving and keep moving, you know, in that sense. And I think, you know, obviously that I had 3 days of not sleeping, not drunk anything, not eating anything, just taking copious amounts of drugs. And my body was all over the place. You know, it was pretty much shutting down. It was fatigued, knackered, you know, everything, you know, in that sense. I remember one point I was sitting on a corner of this road and this woman drove past, and she stopped. I'm a big lad, Susie, right? I'm 6'5", right? And she stopped and she went to me, "Are you okay?" And I went to her, "No." And I was crying. And she went to me, "No." And she went, "Can I help you?" And I went, "You can't." I said, "It's too late." You know what I mean? And she reluctantly drove off. And then she came round again. And she went to me, "Are you sure I can't take you somewhere?" And I was like, "No." I said, "There's nowhere that I can go." You know what I mean? And I thanked her, and she drove off. And people look, but people don't know what's going on. You know, they just look at what they see in front of them and don't give it any more space. And like I remember I ended up sitting outside a church for about, it felt like for decades. So here's the ironic thing, right? So I got to this church and there was a guy sitting, and I thought this guy was following me. I thought this guy was like following me to do whatever. I don't know what he was, but in my brain he had catastrophized the arse out of it. And I remember he kept looking at me and I kept looking at him. But I remember I just kept crying. And then he came up and he said something to me. He said, like, "What are you doing now?" And I was like, "Well, what are you doing now?" And we got into a conversation bit in between me crying and all this. And it turns out that this guy, he lived opposite. And whilst we were talking, his girlfriend or his wife kept coming out with a baby. And what I was, and this is me, right? So I'm in the depths of kind of like, don't want to be anymore. And I'm already analysing this interaction between them. She come out holding the baby and she put a bottle in the recycle. But she kept going out and coming back in and going out and coming back in. So he's telling me, so basically what happened is they broke up. He kicked her out. Then she kicked him out. And then they reconciled and he came back. And then it broke down again. And now he's telling me that she won't let him come in and see the babies and all this sort of stuff. And I'm going to her, "Mate, she wants you to go over and talk to her. Nobody comes out and puts one item in the bin, one at a
One
time,
at a
holding
time,
the
yeah.
baby, staring at you as if to say, why don't you come and talk?" And this is me telling him this, you know, and I'm literally, my life has fallen to pieces. And he's like, "No, she don't." Well, mate, I'm saying to you, mate, I swear to you, what she's saying to you is her body language is saying, "I need you to get up and I need you to come across and I need you to do this. This is what I need from you." I said, she's not even got to say a word to you. And I'm convincing this guy this. And this guy's like, this guy went to me and went, "What are you doing here?" And I went, "My life's falling to pieces and I don't know what to do about it. I'm in a really bad way." And he went, "What can I do to help you?" And I was like, "Nothing." I went, "The only way that you can help me is to help you. When Go and talk to your wife." I went, "It might not work out." I said, "It doesn't." I said, "But she's saying to you that she wants you to make an effort. Like, just think about it." And then my sister turned up in the car, and then they got me in the car and sent back to my mum's. But even in that, you know, when he asked me that question, I was just kind of like, "Your life's more important than mine, mate." You know, like, seriously. Um, and but even in that, you know, I remember being in the car with my sister crying and apologizing for crying and apologizing for getting myself in that situation because I am the protector. I'm your bigger brother. You shouldn't see me like this. And I'm still saying this to her, and I'm on my back. Do you know what I mean? Like, and then I'm going back to my mum's house, and I'm having to. It's almost like you kind of like you want them to see you in that state because there's nowhere else
Yeah.
to go. Like, rock bottom doesn't take vacancies. So it's almost like, well, I'm going to hang everything out here, and let me just see what I get back. And my family were brilliant. You know, they really were. You know, I even told them about the suicide attempts and all that because I needed to get rid of it. And I remember my mum saying to me, "Look, don't worry. Like, you're here. Let's just get you some help." And I was just kind of like, "I didn't expect you to say that. I was expecting you to beat me up or kick me out or tell me you were disappointed," and it wasn't. But my brain and my thoughts and was telling me otherwise. And that taught me a big lesson was that sometimes don't believe everything that you think because, you know, it's not all true. You know, it's not all true. And I have a big debt to like my sisters and my husband and my mum, you know, for doing that for me because um they were the people that I wanted to spare from how I was feeling, you know, for the pain that I was feeling inside. I didn't want them to have any of that. I didn't want them to feel that. You know, I felt that I was chosen because I was capable. But it's different now for me. Like it's a lot different now for me. You know, I understand that happiness isn't linear. It's not a thing that is consistent. I understand that I have to create my happiness. I'm the one that creates that feeling, and I know hand on heart that I'm good. I'm good on my own.
Mm.
But I also my relationship with Mark has changed so much, like so much. Like, I really let him in, like really let him in. And, you know, if he leaves, he leaves. If he stays, he stays. But I can't make him do either one of those things. But what I can do is continue to be me and to continue to grow and to become a better husband and to be the husband that he needs me to be in the way that I can be that, and to be the person that I can be in the way that I need myself to be that. You know, as I said, don't get me wrong. You know, every morning I get up and I have to really put my intentions down for the day and really not give myself a hard time. And there are times when I climb into my head, Susie, and I just want to kick fuck out of myself. But I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
But I don't allow it to go any further than it needs to, because I've got far too much things to do. I've got too much to achieve, too many things that I want to experience myself, and too much stuff that I've got to pass on to other people. You know, I found my vocation now. I know that I had to go through that to understand who I am and what I can offer. And, you know, I'm still working on me. Yeah, I'm still working on me. You know, there is never going to be this finished article. And I'm happy with that. And I'm never going to be perfect. And I love that because it means I can be as messy as fuck. And it's my adventure, man. Like, it's my adventure of a lifetime. And I do what I do because I want to, not because I have to. And that's really important to me. You know, it's really important that if one I stop enjoying it, I'll get up and move on to something else. Yeah, and I've had to really teach myself that is, you know, when it starts being fun, go and do something else. Go and allow yourself to explore. And that's what I want to kind of just pass this on to all the men that I come in contact with, is that don't unpack where you are because you're just going through it. You're not staying there. You know, I never had someone tell me that. I never had someone say to me, look, you're going to go through this, but there is going to be, you know, a light at the end of the tunnel. I just want to be the voice that I never had. I don't know everything, but I know some things.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I think we just, listen, we're born to evolve, ain't we? You know, I wasn't going to be in pain all the time. If I'd taken my own life and it was successful, I wouldn't know how it feels like now to be in less of pain,
Yeah.
but being able to control it. I didn't think about that. You know, I just wanted to get rid of this feeling that I had inside that was just fucking driving me mad. You know, and I couldn't explain it to somebody. I couldn't tell somebody what it felt like because it was just all encapsulated of me. It was me, you know. But I couldn't put that into words. I couldn't put it into a color. I couldn't put it into a feeling. It was just me.
Finale. It's such an emotional story. Yeah, yeah. I find
You
it.
okay?
Yeah, no, it's just so it's so many moving things in that, and it made me think about so many things I don't even know where to um like I one of the big, you know, in the research, one of the big risk factors that you see is around substance abuse, so drinking, drugs, and you know how that can be kind of a pain relief tool for certain men who haven't been given healthier options for relieving their pain, and like these sort of destructive cycles that men can then you know, people in general can get into, and trying to regulate, trying to seek relief from your pain via a mechanism that's going to lead you to even further pain. It's so agonizing to see those patterns you know, happening. And then what you were saying about like in that moment where you're kind of, you're full of grief and full of pain, but you're saying to somebody else that what they can do to make you feel better is do something to make themselves feel better. And that woman stopping in the car to, you know, this stranger just seeing this other human being in pain and wanting to know what she can do, like this incredible like vibration that we have inside of each other to care about one another, people that we don't know, is just so, you know, kind of extraordinary. And so, you know, it's painful as well to imagine that you were once full of so much pain, and and where that could have, how that could have ended. And yeah, just very emotional.
I think there has to be a willingness from the person though to want to make some changes.
Yeah,
As I said, like I'm 8 years in, and I call it an adventure of a lifetime because it is, because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where life's going to take me, but I'm open to that because I'm willing to embrace that. Whereas before I'd repel it because it was about controlling. I had to control that.
yes,
I
yeah,
had to make
yeah,
sure that
yeah,
I kept
yeah,
control as much as possible. Now I'm willing to give up control
yeah,
because I know that I could also have the control to go, actually, I don't want to be doing this no more, in that sense. But you're right, it has to be up to that person. You know, you have to want to do it for you. It has to be about you because people can leave you. Relationships break down, people go, people grow, children grow, but it's still you. It all starts and ends with you. Do you know what I mean? And if you need to, there has to be a way that you can find a way to live with yourself harmoniously with all the shit that
yeah,
comes with it, you know, but knowing that you don't have the capacity to deal with everything and it's okay to go, can you help me?
yeah,
I just need a bit
yeah,
of advice, or can you give me a different perspective on this, or what would you do? But at the end of the day, it's your choice with what you do with that information because it all comes back to a choice, don't it? I chose to take my choices away from me because the way that I was feeling was driving me into one direction. But there was nothing big enough to say to me, hang on a second, let me just think about this. This calling was far too big. Do you know what I mean? It was just everything is just shoehorning into that, and there's nothing that you can do. Even if you had a good day at work or you had a good weekend or whatever,
yeah,
then that feeling will come. It's like drugs and alcohol. You can party in the penthouse all weekend, but you're going to crash and burn and be in the basement, come Monday. But you're going to be there with all the regret, all the embarrassment, all the shame, and all the shit that you've been trying to avoid. That's all sitting with you. And it's all looking at you and going, see, you think you could outrun me? I don't think so, mate. And the only way to outrun it is to deal with it
mm,
because you can't outrun your shadow. And your shadow is you.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, Lee. And I've every time I've spoken to a man who's suicidal, once they start to tell you about their lives and the things that have happened, you're like, I'm not surprised that your life reached a point where the pain that you've experienced and the inadequate tools that you've been given to help you regulate that pain, I'm not surprised that it reached a threshold where it felt in that moment to be unbearable. So
Mm-hmm.
I think um, I think that's we don't know what's in each other's backpacks. We don't know what people have been asked to cope with through life, like what their experiences have been, and the like wounds that they carry, and you know, and I think that like the decision to make things different has to come from yourself. But I don't think you necessarily have to do it for you. Like you can get help and still feel like you're a piece of shit. But like that there can be other people that you want to stay in existence for, who need you, that you um um matter profoundly too. And but of course it's so hard to see sometimes when your head is full of so much like anguish, how you could possibly matter to somebody else. The pain can rob you from seeing um seeing all of those things, like the idea that you had about how your sisters and mum were going to react, which was actually the opposite of how they responded in reality. But your pain and this kind of like it robs you of seeing what what the reality can be. And my heart breaks for the people that were never given the opportunity to have that moment to support the person that they love. And um yeah, it's it's so challenging being a human being, Lee, and the best thing that we, you know, that ability to care for one another, I think, is the foundation of what will navigate us through. And we have to like learn to, you know, exercise it, you know, safely and healthily as much as we can. To bring us back to the topic of like that deep reflection that we need to do, I think, as society and culture, to really think about the ways in which we listen to men and the ways in which we may not be doing that well at the moment, is an important part of also, as well, things that we've talked about, people about finding safe people to talk to, expressing those feelings, and all of those things. It has to happen in, which is what I love about these peer support groups, and you know, that's built, like listening is built into those dynamics and environments. So yeah.
Susie, personally, from me to you, I think you're incredible. I think what you've done over the last 4 years to actually give these guys a voice, them personally and individually, a voice to sit and talk about how they found themselves in the situation they're in, is commendable. I really do think it is, because, you know, there's a lot of work going out there that's being done, but the work that you're doing, actually allowing somebody to talk about how they're feeling and what their drivers were and what their anchors were and what that build up was, and, you know, everything that was going through, is something that we need to hear. You know, we need to hear that, because what it will do is it will give us an understanding, it will give us insight and knowledge, but it'll also give us permission to go, actually, if they're talking about it, maybe I can as well. And that's what it's about, ain't it, really? Thank you so much for being
My
a guest.
pleasure.
I've
My
taken so
pleasure.
much away from this. If people need
Likewise.
to find you, or they want to get access to your papers, where can they find that? And can they get
So
access to your papers?
yeah, so the I'm on Instagram mainly, which is mail underscore suicide underscore research. I might
I'll
need to
put it in
check
a bio.
that. It's
I'll put it for
terrible.
those of you listening. I'll put it in the bio. Don't worry.
And then there's a male suicide research website where all the papers are. I'm also working at the moment to produce some public guides, so that but if anybody needs access to anything, there's also my email address is on my Instagram page. Like, for me, it's so, I want to get this information into the hands of people whose lives it is about. So yeah, I really welcome people getting in touch, and yeah, so please do. Yeah, thank you, Lee. It's been such a pleasure. Like, what a beautiful, moving conversation. I feel very grateful that our paths have crossed, and grateful for
Likewise.
everything that you're doing. And
Likewise. Likewise.
yeah,
It takes a certain person to be able to do the certain stuff that we do, because of the fact that, so this is a bit of advice I'll give to anybody. The only way that you can understand someone else's experiences is to understand your own first. We've all got a role to play in this, as you said. And it isn't about fixing, it isn't about solution finding, it's about providing space, and allowing somebody to talk about what's in here and what's in here. Because we only know what we know, and when we keep it inside it's also colliding with everything else that's going on. But when you say out loud, you can rationalize it. I know it sounds silly in my head, but this is how I'm feeling. It's not silly. You know, let's deal with that. You know, what do you need from me? How do you need me to show up for you? You know, and that's one of the things I teach the guys is ask, what do you need from me? How do you need me to show up? I said, and then they'll tell you. I said, because what you might be doing and the way that you're doing it might not work for them. But because that's what you keep doing, you keep showing up like that, we just accept and adapt. But that's probably not what they want. So what do you need from me? How do you need me to show up? And also tell people the same thing. I need you to show up like this. I need you to show up like this, and I need you to be like this with me. And if those people can't do that, then you need to start questioning your relationships.
Yeah.
Because they're not listening.
Yeah. I think, Lee, I think it's so important what you've said, and being able to articulate that for other people as well. Because for me, when I'm at my low point, I don't want advice. I don't want people telling me, have you thought about A, B, C? I just want you to listen to what I'm saying. And I want somebody to hear it. And I think taking responsibility for the things you need and articulating those to the people that love you, so that they know, you know, they know the answer to that question of how you want them to show up for you. It's, you know, that's, yeah, really powerful.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget to leave a review and subscribe.